Hello. Okay, we are live. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Sullivan. I am a senior software engineer here at Gatsby. We're doing something a little bit different today. We have a fun, I guess it's not a panel. We have a fun series of Gatsby folks to come in to talk to you about what's going on at the company, what's coming up next. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to bring on Dustin, who is our first guest. Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining. Do you want to introduce yourself and how
Sure.
you got to Gatsby?
Yeah, well, that's going to be a longer story, so I'll do a quick intro. My name is Dustin Shao. Hopefully we got a good number of attendees today. Some of you may know me from my open source days at Gatsby around 2 years ago. I joined. So my current title is VP of Product. So helping run product, helping meet and exceed your needs, and then also helping you basically confidently choose Gatsby. So super excited to talk today about a lot of things. Maybe we'll do some demos. Like I mentioned, I am still an engineer. I still got it. I like to joke. So I might do some live coding and show some of the things, kind of give a taste of what we're going to be showing with the upcoming event we're calling Gatsby Camp on June 8th.
Woo, nice. Very cool. So before we get into that, I guess, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do as the VP of Product and just like how, because you were recently became the VP of Product. You want to talk about like how you got there?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, it's funny to tell a story. Oftentimes you're like, well, 10 years ago. So I won't go that far back. But so day to day, what I help do is I help lead the product team. So at kind of like the inside baseball look of Gatsby is we have 4 product-led squads at Gatsby. So each kind of focused on one area of the product, one distinct pillar of the product. So there's open source focused squads and there's cloud focused squads. And so ultimately, it's kind of helping each of those squads, deliver the maximal value for you, the user, and then making sure that we are also listening to you, the user, understanding your needs, delivering solutions to true problems, and ultimately, helping make the best kind of like not only framework, but helping make the best modern web experience for all of you. So that's kind of our mission at Gatsby. I like to say bringing developers and marketers together to create high performance websites. Ultimately, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. It's going to take a while. That's what we're trying to do. So to tell that story, I guess I'm kind of not shy per se, but definitely I don't want to talk too much about myself. But I think it's useful for this audience. So 2 years ago, I was an engineer on the open source team. So if you've ever used a feature called Asset Prefix or gone and look at some of the PRs, there's a pretty exhaustive list of Circle CI tests and some Cypress tests. I've put together a lot of that infrastructure and then moved into engineering management, moved into leading customer success, and then of course now leading products. So it's kind of fun. It's one of the great things about startups is you can wear a lot of hats in a lot of different places and pockets of the organization. So we have a couple career postings. So if if this sounds interesting to you, hopefully you can maybe apply for some of those. And so yeah, anyways, the like quick version of the story is I wrote a blog post about how to build a blog with Gatsby, which is very meta. And then Kyle, the kind of creator, co-founder of Gatsby, was like, hey, I love your blog post. And so it's one of the top 5, I think, blog posts still. So my blog, which I haven't updated in years now, I need to go post some more content, is built with Gatsby, of course. So that's kind of how I got here. That's kind of the journey. And that's what I help do and help lead.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. You're getting some love in the chat.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Gatsby Camp?
Of course. Yeah. So again, kind of getting like I keep using the phrase inside baseball. I feel like I speak metaphorically, and it's like I don't like speaking metaphorically. So basically, to kind of give a sense of like internal things, like why we do these types of things. So they're super helpful to like focus the organization towards putting something on stage. I don't know if people know this story, but when Apple launched the iPhone, Steve Jobs was up there and he had like 5 or 6 or 7 iPhones basically, because each one of them would like bug out and there'd be such issues each time. And like all of the engineers were taking shots of whiskey because, they were so petrified. And so ultimately this like fear of like putting something on stage, of like showing something amazing to the world. I really like that mindset. And so for us, we try to do kind of like a quarterly event. So we had Gatsby Camp in March, and then we have Gatsby Camp in June 8th, in 6 short days. So please register if you haven't already. And so again, like the goal is to just like work towards something, where we're demoing something exciting. And in this case, I feel like it's the elephant is out of the room, or the elephant, like everyone knows what we're launching, which is functions. And so we're super excited to like demonstrate functions, and not just like show the value of functions, but like have our users start telling customer stories, start giving you some ideas of, what you can do with functions. And ultimately the kind of theme we're trying to rally around is, I chose Gatsby, like I said, 2+ years ago because it was an SSG. And I think the web has evolved. And so to define SSG, Gatsby is a static site generator. And so anyways, to be a little less long-winded, I think the modern web, it has evolved and is evolving. And sometimes static isn't just enough. And so what we're really showing at Gatsby Camp is how you can kind of like turn the static dynamic, how you can bring your idea to life. And so we'll have some demos. Hopefully, each of you will be attending, and you can kind of bring something novel. You can, choose your next project or your current project with Gatsby, and hopefully you can take something and apply it to your day-to-day job. It's really the goal of Gatsby Camp. And yeah, we're just super psyched to hopefully have a few of you in attendance.
Nice. Yeah, I dropped a link to the sign up in the chat. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. For folks that are maybe new to functions or to Gatsby, do you want to talk a little bit about what functions are and why you might use them?
Yeah, I might even jump into a demo real quick. So
yeah, let's do it.
We'll do it live. I have literally not rehearsed. So when you do things live and live demos, sometimes things do go awry. But so real quick, what I'll do is people have seen this demo if they've followed me at Gatsby Camp or just seen some of it. So I assure you this is the last time I'll use this damn demo, but it's my wedding website. And so I built it with Gatsby.
Can you make your font size bigger?
Of course I can. Boom.
Sweet.
Better. All right.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So serverless functions is what we're launching. We call it Gatsby Functions. It's a very kind of simple way that you can add in serverless functions to your Gatsby application. So it's available in the open source product, and then you can deploy it to Gatsby Cloud. What you as a user get is, whether you're a novice developer, whether you're a professional seasoned developer, and like everything in between. I think it really makes you kind of feel like a superhero. And so what I actually haven't done this yet, and I need to, but this is the, excuse me, this is, hope I can increase the sidebar a little bit. So this is the wedding website. And the first iteration of this, like I said, I built it a year plus ago. And I built it before we had serverless functions. And so this is Terraform code. For those who don't know, Terraform is from HashiCorp. It's basically a way that you can provision and scale infrastructure. So here I'm using AWS, and I'm building out my backend infrastructure, which is a whole hell of a lot of code, basically, to provide an RSVP functionality to the website. And so what serverless functions enable you to do is they enable you to they basically abstract all of this boilerplate. We deploy, we handle the provisioning of infrastructure, the versioning, it's just a plain old file in Git. So, a new version of your API is as easy as, git commit, git deploy, and then Gatsby Cloud will provision that new API. And you can even roll back and go to previous versions because, again, it's just version control. So anyways, basically what functions enable you to do is to delete all of this code and sleep soundly at night. And so ultimately, this is a RMRF way to basically remove all of this. And then we can then leverage the source API folder. And so I replaced basically all of that Terraform code, which you can see was like 10 files. And ultimately, like, stuff breaks, and I don't really want to be in the business myself as a kind of front-end developer of maintaining, provisioning, and scaling up servers. I want to be in the business of crafting great experiences and not worrying about scale, not worrying about, hey, is that server still up? Or, oh, crap, I need to go make this change to ensure that it is fixed. And so serverless functions really solve a lot of these use cases, and they basically enable you to build out whatever functionality you kind of need. So here I'm using Airtable. So I'm, wiring it up passing an environment variable. And then the really cool thing I like most about Gatsby Functions is the API is very easy, very intuitive. If you've written an express handler, which many of us probably have, you might be familiar with the request and response object. And so the idea here is that, just an async function, you export that async function, and then in the local development environment, as well as in Gatsby Cloud, it'll take this, handle the automatic provisioning for you, and then spin up a pretty much infinitely scalable serverless function that you can put in front of your users, and that you can not worry about it going down, not worry about issues. And again, if you want to make changes, just push them up to source control, commit them, and then you have a scalable infrastructure. So not really a demo per se, but we only have 2 minutes left. I was going to see if we could do some live coding, but I can't do that all in 2 minutes. But moral of this story is we're going to be showing a lot of the use cases of what you can build with functions at Gatsby Camp, as well as how you can use functions for e-commerce use cases. So this story, amongst others, more interesting stories, will be demonstrated at Gatsby Camp. And so yeah, this is one of the main things that we'll be launching. Act surprised when you see it. You're kind of getting an early scoop. But yeah, they're pretty amazing. And one of the things I like most about using them, the local DX just feels natural. So actually, Kirsten, a senior PM on my team, has mentioned me I have 20 minutes. So I can do a little bit more of a live coding demo. So let's do that. And so increasing the font size again. Oh, and then just a heads up, there's a great tweet thread. Hopefully we can share it in the chat, where collectively 2 weeks ago, we all got together. We did we called it a YC demo day. It was super fun. Basically, we all used functions to build something. So we assembled into teams of 4, 5, 6 people, and we built out something novel, sophisticated, useful, backed by Gatsby functions. So you'll see some of those in a talk later at Gatsby Camp. But anyways, yeah, the kind of there's really not a limit to what you can do with Gatsby functions, and that's what makes me most excited. So anyways, I have a quick little e-commerce demo with functions. So we'll start from nothing and get to something. And so first thing I'll do is to enable Gatsby functions. You need to be on the latest version of Gatsby. And then you just add a flag. So this is in Gatsby config. I'm just setting functions to true. And then now this will enable me to leverage functions. So this is also demonstrating a recent release we had focused towards e-commerce. Internally, we call this faster POC. I think as you think of it, it's a Shopify starter. So if you're building an e-commerce application with Gatsby, you can have a really great foundation to build on so that you can confidently choose Gatsby for your next site, which may be e-commerce focused. So what's pretty great is that I don't care, nor do I want to kind of go look at Shopify's API documentation. I can just get it up and running by leveraging the starter, by leveraging the source plugin that powers it. So real quick, give me 1 sec. I'll kind of just walk through what we're doing here. And so pull up localhost 8000. And so before this call, 5 minutes before this call, I was adding some products so that you could see how this actually works. So this is a real live Shopify store. I use a Shopify app I don't even recall the name of to basically add product listings. So if you want to come to Destin's store to buy this weird tree, this weird handbag, or this pair of glasses, you actually can. But don't necessarily know why people would want those things. But anyways, of course, you can use this with your real Shopify data pretty easily and pretty seamlessly. And so the intent here, the idea here of functions in e-commerce is that e-commerce has typically been thought of as a pretty dynamic use case. When people think of Gatsby, they oftentimes think of Jest and SSG. And so the point of Gatsby Camp, the kind of story that we're continuing to tell and that we're continuing to tell with our users is that Gatsby basically scales to your needs. And so we're turning this static dynamic and we're continuing to evolve with the modern web. So as an example, I'm going to do a super contrived example. I'm not going to be able to wire up an API just so, but let's say that we wanted to, for instance, create a function. Maybe we wanted to build out a contact us form on this in this e-commerce store. And so all we need to do is create an API folder. We'll call this contact.js. And then you can see, I haven't done anything yet, but Gatsby will hot reload and listen for any changes to these functions, just like it does for any kind of other source code changes. And so like I mentioned here, it's just a plain old function. So we'll call this contact form, and it has a request and a response object, just to kind of show the hello world of Gatsby functions. This is a really intuitive, simple API. So response.status 200, I'm going to send back, hey, this worked. And then we also have a JSON helper. And so I can just send back JSON body. So I'll say message hello world. So I'll save this. We'll go back here. And then how you can invoke this as a user is with basically what it looks like on your local file system. So hello world. Oops. Oh no. What did I do wrong here? Source, API, contact. This is why live demos are so fun. Give me one sec. Oh, I wonder if I'm not on the latest and greatest Gatsby. There's this great yarn command, yarn upgrade interactive. I am on the latest. Fun. I have 1 minute to solve this. Default function, contact form, API contact. Oh, did I spell functions wrong? Did not. So what's interesting is the following flags are active. There are 2 other flags, functions, which you may be interested in. No. All right, well, I can really briefly then, I guess, just show it working. This one does work. This, of course, is that old wedding website.
You've also got a question in the chat about testing and getting feedback from the functions. So like results or errors, where that happens. Like when your site is deployed.
When your site is deployed, it actually happens in Gatsby Cloud locally. What we do is we kind of do what we do in the local dev environment for anything else. So we'll pop up kind of a, I think it's called the React hot loader component. So you'll get that local feedback, not only in your console, but ideally in your local dev environment. You actually saw the error I got here was the 404 error. In production, if you're using Gatsby Cloud, what that will basically do is for every single build, you have build logs and you also have function logs. And so the function logs are basically piped to that cloud environment where you can then see whether something is airing, what logs you have. So for instance, if you're using console log, console warn, console error in that function, it will just show up in that cloud environment like you would expect. So I'm almost over time. I hope I can get to a successful demo. I'd be disappointed if I wouldn't. But moral of the story, what I was hoping to show and convey today is that functions enable you to turn the static dynamic. And then if you can come to Gatsby Camp, you can see working demos, I assure you, but you can see not only my demos and some other demos from the internal Gatsby team, but you can see demos from customers and users and the great things that they're building, which hopefully you can apply some of those techniques to your next Gatsby site. So finally, real quick. Oops. So I built a Yelp function. So for the honeymoon, I wanted to be like, what are the top 5 places that we can go? And so I find Yelp kind of frustrating, and they show the sponsored ads instead of like what I actually want to see, which is like the best food of this category in this locale. So what you can actually do is, and here's an example of functions working, is basically you can, I'm querying Yelp with this GraphQL API, and then I'm going to return it back to the user. Clearly, I got to wire this up correctly, but this is functions working. After this call, I'm going to, it's one of those things with live demos, and be like, what was wrong? It's probably something simple, probably a typo. Maybe we'll share it after in the chat or something. I'll pop back in later or just in Twitch. But thanks for having me, Megan. I hope this was enjoyable.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Users, I feel like I did a lot of talking, but I hope you all enjoyed this, and definitely come to Gatsby Camp to check out all the latest and greatest.
All right. Thanks for joining, Dustin. I'm going to take you out. All right. Great. So next up, we have Mike. Let me bring him in. Hello.
Hi.
So Mike is a staff security engineer. Did I get that right? At Gatsby.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background and how you got here?
Yeah, totally. So, I'm relatively new here at Gatsby. I've been here a little more than a month now, so it's been awesome so far. How did I end up at Gatsby? Before joining Gatsby, I was an entrepreneur for 15 years. I had a startup company that I founded with a friend from business school right out of school. And then eventually I founded a consulting firm, and I was doing consulting work for 12 years. So consulting work being security and software product development. So we would work on everything from building regular websites to web applications to special internal projects at companies. We specialize in small to mid-sized businesses. So companies that maybe didn't have an internal security or software development team, but were big enough that they needed to do things not on Excel spreadsheets anymore, needed real systems to develop. So we did that. And also the other side of my business, the security side, was focused on offensive security testing. So that was penetration testing, application security assessments, building security programs, and all that fun stuff. So that's what I did for a long time. And I ended up at Gatsby because I think I was just looking for new challenges. I was looking to branch out into new things. I'd been doing consulting a long time. I absolutely loved my clients. I still do. my previous clients. I had a great time working with everybody. I thought it was time to move on and do some new stuff. And the opportunity presented at Gatsby was just super cool because it's the opportunity to create a security program, and from basically scratch. I mean, there was security work being done before I showed up. I want everybody to know that. It's not like, it was day one, but it's all about formalizing what had been done and taking things multiple steps further now. And being able to do that at a cool company that's working on disruptive web technologies that is growing rapidly, that is a really cool opportunity. So I threw my hat in the ring, and now I'm here at Gatsby.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what your general thoughts are on security for Gatsby, or just like what kinds of things are top of mind for you for the next couple of weeks, months?
Yeah, weeks, months, years,
Yeah, as long as you want to go.
Yeah, it's not stuff that you can do overnight, right? So yeah, when I came in, I specified several items that were really top of my list, and I think they resonated with the management of the company too. So they are on the top of the list now. From the technical perspective, we are working on, so like I mentioned, I come from an offensive security background. So people who aren't familiar with that term, who are in information security, offensive security are the attackers, right? We are the folks that find flaws in systems, in applications, and we exploit those flaws. That could be, it's a big bucket what offensive security is, right? So it could be everything from security research, developing and adapting techniques to breach organizations in obviously a legitimate way, right? And it's also things like the penetration testing and red teaming, adversarial emulation. So we're looking at developing all these programs internally. So from the technical side, yeah, offensive security, where this fits at Gatsby is we're going to be looking at flaws in our technology stack. We're going to be looking at flaws in the technology that we depend on, either from an application standpoint or a infrastructure standpoint. So it's important to poke as many holes as possible through all these layers and understand what an adversary might be able to do or not do in that environment. So that's a big part. Doing general penetration testing on a regular basis in our environment. So it's always great to get third parties to come in and perform penetration tests, right? You get a different perspective, but it's also equally important to do these tests internally. And I am a big advocate of what's called assume breach penetration testing. So if folks aren't familiar with what that is, assume breach means you're starting out from the standpoint of an adversary already being on the network in some way. The reason you do this is because during a penetration test, maybe you can't breach a system, but inside of that system's ooey gooey and full of flaws, right? You want to be able to efficiently find and remediate those flaws as a result of the penetration test. And if you're stuck on the outside, you may never get in, but maybe an attacker down the road can get in, or maybe there's some other flaw that can be leveraged to get in there, right? So it's important to conduct testing throughout the infrastructure and the application stack. So we're going to be doing a lot of assume breach testing that's actually going to be coming underway pretty soon. I'm going to be planning out the initial campaigns probably in the next several weeks, and then we're going to have that undergoing, and that's something that is going to be on an ongoing basis. We plan, we execute, we remediate, retest, and then go on in a cycle like that. The other big technical program that I am working to get off the ground is our adversarial emulation. So adversarial emulation is essentially mimicking attacker behavior in an environment. And what we're specifically going to be doing is what's called purple teaming, where red teaming is offensive, blue teaming is defensive, right? Purple teaming brings these two together. And purple teaming at a core really is emulating adversarial behavior and then building up detections with the environment in your environment that can detect these behaviors, because you can't mitigate everything. An adversary will try to abuse and get somewhere on your network. So detection, the current thought in information security is that detection goes a long way. It doesn't replace prevention, right? You still have to patch, you still have to do pen testing, but detection helps fill those gaps and allows you to have visibility in what an attacker is doing. So I'll stop there. I have more on the business side, but I've been talking for a while, so I'll kick it over.
No, it's great. I personally don't know very much about security, so I think learning about this is really interesting. I guess, like, sort of piggybacking off of what you were talking about before, what sort of advice do you have for folks who want to get into security testing, or like what kinds of things can they look out for on their own sites?
Sure. Yeah. So, if you're a web application developer, I think it's extremely important to understand what's known as the OWASP top 10 flaws. So OWASP is an organization that I think they're a nonprofit, and they work to educate people about web application security. The OWASP top 10 is the top 10 flaws currently exploited on web applications. So if you have a good understanding of what those top 10 flaws are, how they manifest in code, and how to exploit them yourself, you're going to be doing yourself a really big favor and your customers a really big favor when you develop web applications. I think the other thing that is really important with a technology like Gatsby, previously, I was a big LAMP stack developer, right? PHP, Linux, Apache, MySQL. And I came from that traditional development stack where there's a lot going on server side. With Gatsby, there's a lot more going on client side. So things are, we're adapting, and Dustin obviously had a lot about functions, which is serverless side, right? So there is processing on a server somewhere when you add functions, but a lot in Gatsby naturally happens in the browser on the client side. I think if you're coming from that big stack standpoint to something like a Jamstack, it's important to understand what data is in your application and what data is transferring between you and the servers. The reason being is that you can leak secrets and data easier. I mean, you can obviously develop very secure Gatsby sites. So, but you have to be conscious of what you're putting into the browser. If you're making a database connection from your browser and putting the database password as a cache secret and then making calls out, well, guess what? Everybody in the world has access to your database. And we see those mistakes a lot, I think, especially in web application or like apps, like actual bundled apps, that developers don't realize that adversaries can decompile your app and look at the network traffic and pull out all these secrets, right? And then once they gain access to those secrets, they gain access to backend systems and your customer data. So it's something, I think it's a dynamic to be to think of, and just be mindful of that when you develop, but also verify, right? Look at that network traffic, see what's being passed back and forth.
Nice. Very cool. Thanks. Are there any sort of like tools or like, I don't know, sites or apps that people can use to do those kinds of checks?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, just using your browser works really well. Open up your developer tools and look at the network traffic on there, either Chrome or Firefox. I'm sure other browsers have it too. Go through those network requests and look to see the data being posted and the data being received. And know also if it's base64 encoded, which a lot of data will be in web traffic like this, in the API connections. Understand first off what base64 encoding looks like, and I think once you kind of get an eye for, oh, this is base64, you'll see it. Base64 is not encrypted or anything like that, right? It's encoded, right? It's a way to transfer data easier between client and server. Unpack those base64 blobs and see what's in there. There might be something really interesting, right? And that's what, if you're having a web application penetration test done, that's what one of the things that we'll do. But in terms of, so that's going to get you 90% of the way there, right? Unless you're doing real security testing on your application. A big tool that is very popular with web application security is called Burp Suite. And there's a free version, there's a pro version. Pro version doesn't really cost even a lot. But Burp Suite acts as a man-in-the-middle proxy between you and the web application. So we can intercept all the data and, more importantly, replay it, right? So you can tweak the data that's being posted back and forth and try to break the application that way. And if that's how you uncover flaws, right? You think about what if I just change this parameter? What if I just stuff some extra data in here? Burp Suite allows an easy way to do that.
Nice. I love that. It seems like a lot of the security stuff is just sort of that like mental experiment of like, okay, so we assume that people can't get into this, but what if they could? Like, what sort of havoc could they wreak if they could get into it?
Yeah,
nice.
For sure. That's assumed breach at the core. And jumping back real quick, back to some of the stuff we have going on at Gatsby, because I definitely want to mention it. I spoke a lot about the technical program that we have, and that's the technical security program that will help keep our customers' data safe. The other side of that's the business side and what we're doing there. And one of the big initiatives we have going on right now is our Sock2 Compliance attestation. So if folks aren't aware of what that is, Sock2 is a standard from the AICPA. That's the American Institute of CPA, of Certified Public Accountants. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that right. But Sock2 is a compliance standard that organizations can get that can basically, you attest that you are meeting certain security and data protection requirements at your organization. And this compliance process goes through everything you're doing, your whole security program, all your business practices, and analyzes that in a formal setting. And then when you come out of that, you hopefully will achieve SOC 2 compliance. And so I think this is a really big thing that's going on right now at Gatsby. We're putting a lot of effort into this because I think we have a lot of great stuff that has been done and is being instituted now. And SOC 2 is a way of signifying to our customers that we are a mature organization. We can be trusted with your data. We can be trusted with security. And this compliance process helps kind of put a stamp of approval on that. So later this year, we're working on it right now. I don't want to say any like dates or anything like that, but it's something that's really, we're actively working on right now. And hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to have this attestation completed and out there for everybody. It'll be awesome.
Nice. That seems like something like SOC 2 compliance seems like something that would be useful maybe for folks that work at an agency. If you want to be able to prove to your clients, like, look, the stuff that we're building for you is secure. That's like a kind of checklist or checkbox that might be helpful.
It's really important because to be SOC 2 compliant, you also have to rely on services that are SOC 2 compliant, right? And so if you have a core service that is hosting all your data, and that's not SOC 2 compliance, then you may or may not be in SOC 2 compliance at that point. So it's a way of just demonstrating the maturity of the organization. I will say, as a security person, compliance is not security, right? There's been a lot of very compliant organizations that have been breached just this year, but it's a way of demonstrating maturity. So if you're just doing compliance, you're doing security very wrong, right? And that's why we're putting a lot of focus on our technical security program and building up ways to stop adversaries. But how do we show people that? We can't walk people in and say, oh, look at all our security controls, right? I mean, that would actually be really bad, right? I mean, we can talk about some of the stuff we're doing at a high level and maybe even be able to share research out with the larger community as we develop interesting things. But we can't just walk somebody in. SOC 2 kind of gives us that ability to talk about what we have going on, but not just disclose every little thing that we're doing here inside the organization.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. Do you have any last things as we wrap up? Any last little things that you want to plug, or where people can find you online if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm on Twitter. I think I was in the mentioned in the tweet there. So if you want to follow me, I generally tweet only about information security stuff. So if you're into that, especially offensive security stuff, that's where I'm there. But I write. I try to contribute research. I just actually did a talk last week at the Sans Purple Team Summit. Talking about supply chain breaches. So, I'm out there talking about security things. And if you're of that mindset, feel free to connect. I always happy to connect with like-minded, cool people.
Sweet. Thanks for joining, Mike.
All right. Thank you.
It was nice to have you on. All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right. We've got one more special guest for you. We're going to bring on Brad, who is our VP of Engineering. So let me add him in. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? Do you want to introduce yourself?
It's going well. Loving the talk so far. Yeah. So I'm Brad Ledford. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Gatsby. Been in software ever since, oh my God, I'm older. So let's just go ahead and let's just say early 90s, we'll say. That's kind of when I got my start.
Nice. Do you want to talk about like what you got started in, basically like how you ended up at Gatsby?
Well, yeah, kind of similar to previous talks, we could go really far back. Maybe what I'll start with is a fun story. So when I was in college, my not wife at the time, but soon to be wife, and I used to interact with each other over there's a command in Unix called talk, and we used to jump on our various university servers and you'd type talk and then the username for the person you were trying to connect to. And I can remember that interaction. This is kind of pre ICQ and various AIM systems, but I can remember that real-time interaction with her all the way across the country being sort of a bit of a cultivating thing for my interest in software. And was studying business at the time, but getting into more web programming by the late 90s, it was pretty clear that the web was winning, or was about to win the software battle. And so yeah, kind of focused all of my attention on building web apps, and was kind of grew up on the Microsoft stack. So a lot of, prior to C#, there was something called just classic ASP, and getting into databases, so sort of fell in love with database design, and really the enterprise app space. So I got familiar with what companies are looking for software products, and so got a great job as a programmer, right on the heels of the dot-com bust. I mean, it was like I can remember graduating. There were talks of some new recent grads getting signing bonuses of Porsches and just crazy. It was frothy. It was crazy in 2001-ish, and right about 6 months before I graduated, the tides turned a little bit, and it was everything sort of came to a screeching halt. So. But I was fortunate enough to get a very good, exciting job in the healthcare space, and cut my teeth on front end dev. Developed something called an Ajax server on my own with my team before Ajax was even a thing, before jQuery was a thing. So yeah, front end development kind of was always my focus and passion.
Nice. So then what led you to Gatsby? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, kind of programmer days was early 2000s, and have basically realized over the years that I'm a better people person, a better manager than a programmer. And I still love it. I still love the technology, but have always gravitated more toward building teams. And so various roles in the last 10, 15 years have led up to, making a career change to Gatsby as a kind of, what I saw was this, a very popular framework in an extremely fast growing segment of the industry, right? So if you've been around a long enough, like I have, you've seen these sort of trends come and go. And on the front end side, obviously things are kind of just always changing. But one thing that seems to really be emerging is that the more you can get more and more done with fewer and fewer frameworks if you pick something that's a strong choice. So let's take Gatsby as a choice for a blog, right? So if I'm writing a blog, it's very clear from the get-go that was a strong choice where you could get a lot done with that single choice. We're now moving into this phase where more frameworks need to have a fully integrated solution, right? So as I understood Gatsby's roadmap, and as I've joined the team and learned what we're working on, it's very clear to me that we're well aligned to have that complete story with the cloud hosting, our use of our CDN, the backend technology that we're really cultivating with the functions feature that's coming out, and things that I can't talk about that are on the horizon. But it's an exciting time.
Nice. I guess piggybacking off of that, do you want to talk about like what sort of things are top of mind for you as VP of engineering?
Sure. Yeah. So top of mind are really, when you set an ambitious goal out there for a company, you have to make sure that you're putting all of the resources that you have available in the right place, and you have to be very careful to focus. So focus is probably the key word there. It's very easy to, when you have, especially with venture-backed companies, but even when you're bootstrapping and you've got revenue, it's very easy to get kind of pulled off into one direction. And so I think for us and for me in particular, I'm very interested in what our squads are deciding to work on relative to that broader vision. And I think Dustin or somebody mentioned it, but we're very strong believers in building fully autonomous teams, and we call them squads. And we don't do top-down sort of dictation of what is coming in the next release. We sort of, challenge each team to come to the table with what sort of bets do you want to make about the next 3 months, and how do you think that you're going to be able to pull that off? Do you have the team you need? Are you in need of some additional resources? And so that model works. I believe in teams. I believe that the best, most functional software teams I've seen are the kinds that have the confidence to kind of put their hand up when they're about to do something important and tell everybody, "Hey, go away for like 2 weeks. We need to finish this thing." When you have a team that's confident in their ability to just shut the door and get something awesome out, there's something beautiful about it, and I'm seeing it happen here more and more. So very excited to, whether it's the things that we've released most recently with our incremental builds and hosting and now functions soon, or the next things. Big believer in our group that we're building.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely very freeing to be able to have the people on the ground who see like a different set of problems than like leadership, because they're in the weeds of implementing everything. So it's nice to be able to have the ability to say like, hey, this is what we think is important.
Well, it's really fast, right? Would you agree? Like if you see something and you know that it's really the most important thing to work on, right? Like, shouldn't you just have the authority to do that? Yeah. Cool.
Nice. Are there any other things that you want to share or want to talk about?
Oh, well, I guess at the risk of a demo problem, I could just show that we're trying to really move quickly. And so an example of this might be that we've recently released Google Auth. So I can share that. Let's see if I can get this up correctly. So in our cloud, so it's a simple feature, right? And it kind of a table stakes kind of a thing, right? The ability to log in with Google, but it's just something we didn't have. But it's an example that I want to call out as sort of when we have features that our customers are telling us they need, we're going to be working on those and prioritizing those. And the cloud is just shaping up to be this pretty amazing place to get sites live really, really quickly. So if any of you haven't seen Gatsby Cloud, I really highly recommend it. Turning the clock back, I can remember back in the days when we used to use this phrase, and it's kind of assumed to be something today that it wasn't back then. But an IDE was like a fully integrated environment, meaning that you would connect to databases, you would connect to file servers, and push and pull code inside your IDE. And it was really clunky and it was difficult. It was an attempt to make what used to be really challenging a little bit easier. Gatsby Cloud is kind of like peak ease of use for setting up a new site with our ability to grab a template and then just wizard-based workflows. So it kind of blows my mind what we built in such a short time. So with things like Google Auth, one less password to remember, right? So just super excited, and I won't click any further, at the risk of me not having a cosmic site, whatever that is. But yeah.
Just a plug to other folks to go and try it out. Try building a site yourself.
For sure.
Okay, cool. So are there any other things that you want to plug, or where people can find you online if they want to keep tabs on what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm Brad Ledford at Twitter. I've been on there for a while. I do mostly tweet about business and the technology space. So yeah, follow me there. But really, mostly would say follow everything Gatsby's doing. You're going to be missing out if you don't follow what we're doing. So we've got Gatsby Camp coming on June 8th. And then over the summer, I think we're going to be really focusing on communicating, whether we're still kind of trying to work on exactly how best to describe it. But if you consider Gatsby as just the static site generator, I know that we've said this in the past, it's more than static, but we're going to be talking a lot about this right over the summer. It's, whether it's the functions release or other things that are coming. It's going to be an interesting time to, as a Gatsby developer, think a little bit more deeply about what you might be able to get done using this framework and our cloud. So follow Gatsby on social, and I'll mostly just be throwing more love and engagement on that account from my account. So you're probably not going to get much from mine.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Brad. It was great to have you on.
No problem. Thanks for being the MC, and
yeah,
we're all doing this from home, and you make it look easy. I always I log on and I'm always nervous about what's behind me. So
you did great.
Awesome.
All right. Bye. All right. And then one last thing, we have Dustin. We're going to bring him back in. Hello.
Hello.
Do you want to show us your demo?
Yeah, I could not leave on that note. So yes, I wanted to show the working demo, and then I always like showing, how I fixed it. So
opportunity to learn.
For sure. So unfortunately, I already saved it. But what was happening is there was actually two flags fields here. And so the way JavaScript Node works, like with objects, so what was happening is I had this up here, and the last one was winning out. So when we read this file, we read it as flags fastdev. So when you saw in my terminal, if you recall earlier, there was the you're not using functions. That's because it was picking up this bit and not the former bit. So to fix, add these two flags together like they should be. So basically now I'm basically telling Gatsby, please enable the functions flag, and then please enable the fastdev flag. And so let me move StreamYard is kind of in the way. We can see a successful demo, which is super earth-shattering. It is a hello world, but you go to localhost 8000, API contact, and you see hello world. So of course, what you can do here, again, is pretty limitless. But as an example for a contact form, like let's say you wanted to write the Airtable or even a Google Sheet, or maybe you want to send a customized email to your users if they want to be added to like a subscription list or like an email newsletter. Like ultimately, here is the implementation of whatever dynamic functionality you want, and then up here is leverage the power of the NPM ecosystem, use whatever libraries, tools, content, SaaS products, to your heart's content. The power, while also like not losing sight of how the scale this enables, and what you can do is pretty exciting. And so, like I said, I'm a broken record today. Come to Gatsby Camp. You'll learn more about it. But thank you, Megan, for giving me the opportunity to come chat with all these fine folks and show a complete working demo. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. All right. So we're going to wrap it up today. Thanks for joining, everybody. It was great to have you. If you want to tune in next week, next Wednesday, we're going to have part 3 of the Megan's Coding Corner segment, where Generosa, Litton, and I are going to go through the Gatsby tutorial. We're going to work on part 3, which is all about plugins. So sign up for Gatsby Camp, and I'll see you around. Bye, y'all.